There comes a moment in every parent's life when the silence becomes louder than the voices. You look around the dinner table, the same table where you once wide spills, told bedtime stories, and held tiny trusting hands. But now, they're grown, they're busy, and somehow you've become background noise. They talk over you, correct your memories, dismiss your suggestions, and sometimes without even meaning to, they make you feel like your time has passed. You sacrificed so much for them, your sleep, your dreams, your youth. You gave them your whole life, and now, all you want is a little bit of their attention, their care, their respect, but instead, you find yourself tiptoeing around their moods, shrinking yourself just to keep the peace. And you wonder, when did I become invisible in my own home? And the worst part? You start to doubt yourself. You wonder if maybe you are being too sensitive. If maybe respect is too much to ask for now. But deep down, you know it's not. You know who you were, and you're still in there. This didn't happen in one big moment. It faded slowly, over time. But here's the hope. You can bring it back, without anger, without fear, just by becoming who you were always meant to be. Let's begin. Here's the first shift. Stop explaining yourself. Stop begging to be heard. Stop trying to remind them of who you used to be, because the truth is, the more you explain, the more they tune you out. You don't need to list the sacrifices. You don't need to prove your worth. Your presence should speak for itself. And if it doesn't, it's time to reclaim that presence. I once met a woman named Rose. In her younger days, she ran a business, a household, and a life with backbone. She was a force, the kind of woman who got things done without asking permission. But after retirement, something shifted. She started apologizing for speaking too long, for disagreeing, even for being tired. Her children didn't ask her to change, but they also didn't stop it. And slowly, the woman they once admired faded. Until one morning, Rose looked in the mirror and said out loud, "I'm still here, and I'm not done." That day, she started saying no when it mattered. She began speaking her mind, without explaining her reasons. She walked away from conversations that drained her, not with drama, but with dignity. And that changed everything. Her children noticed. They didn't say it at first, but they listened longer, interrupted less, because when Rose stopped shrinking herself, she became visible again. Respect doesn't come from rehashing your past. It comes from honoring your present without apology. So stop chasing approval and start walking like someone who already has it. At first, her children were confused. They weren't used to this version of her. The one who didn't wait for permission, who didn't water herself down just to be more palatable. But over time, they didn't just respect her more, they remembered who she really was. And perhaps, for the first time, as adults, they saw her not just as their mother, but as a woman with a voice of her own. The second shift is simple, but not easy. Stop arguing. Stop raising your voice just to be respected. Because the louder you speak, the less they hear. You think? If you just explain it better. If you list every sacrifice, they'll finally see you. But they don't. Arguments don't change hearts. They harden them. I knew a man named Arthur. He was an engineer, sharp, respected, the kind of man people listened to. At work, he led teams. At home, he led silence, but with his adult children, every conversation turned into a courtroom. They corrected him, dismissed his memories, mocked his tone. He tried to push back. He raised his voice. He demanded to be heard. But all it did was widen the gap, until one evening, something clicked. Arthur didn't yell. He didn't explain. He just paused and stayed quiet. The next time they interrupted, he stood up, walked to the window, and waited. When they asked what he was doing, he said, "I'm waiting for the room to have space for respect. No threats, no guilt, just presence." That moment, they listened, because calm commands more attention than noise ever could. And strength, it often looks like stillness. He didn't win the room with volume. He won it with presence. And that is the kind of power no one can take, because it doesn't come from them. It comes from you. So next time they dismiss you, don't fight for the mic. Own the silence, because real respect echoes when the noise stops. The third shift may be the hardest of all. You must take back your emotional throne, because the moment your happiness depends on your children, you give them the power to destroy it. You love them. Of course you do. But love is not the same as emotional dependency. And longing isn't the same as connection. I once met a woman named June. She was kind, warm, generous, the kind of mother everyone admired from the outside. But behind closed doors, she was shrinking. After her husband passed, her world collapsed into silence. So she poured everything into her children. Daily phone calls, text messages with little hearts, long voicemails, filled with stories no one answered. And when they didn't respond, she called again and again, until one day they stopped picking up, not out of cruelty, but because love that clings too tightly can feel like a weight. So June made a choice. She turned the phone off. She stepped outside, and for the first time in years, she asked herself, "What do I want?" She joined a theater group, painted again, started dressing up for herself, not for anyone else. And then they called, not out of guilt, but out of wonder, because she had become alive again, whole, radiant, magnetic. When you stop chasing connection, you become someone worth returning to. So no more waiting by the phone. Sit tall in your throne, because you're not here to be someone's shadow. You're here to shine. June no longer waited to be invited. She became the invitation to a life of self-respect, of stillness, of joy that didn't beg to be seen. And here's what she discovered. Being needed is fleeting, but being whole, that's power. That's peace. That's the version of you they never forget. Now here's the fourth shift. And this one, it's about power. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that draws a quiet line and holds it. Let's talk about the strength of saying enough. Here's a truth most parents learn too late. You don't lose respect in one big moment. You lose it every time you stay silent. When someone crosses the line, that's why this shift matters so deeply. Set boundaries and enforce them, not with anger, not with threats, but with quiet clarity that doesn't shake. I met a man named Carl, a retired firefighter, brave, respected, calm under pressure. But with his adult children, he was constantly dismissed. They interrupted him, showed up late, borrowed money without paying it back, laughed off his advice, like he was just some old man stuck in the past. And Carl took it for years because it wasn't worth the fight, because they're just stressed, because he didn't want to seem difficult, but inside, he felt smaller each time. Until one Thanksgiving, his son made a sarcastic joke at his expense, right there at the table. Carl didn't yell. He didn't sulk. He simply stood, looked him in the eye, and said, "You're welcome to disagree with me, but disrespect, that's where the conversation ends." He got in his car and left. No drama, no explanations, just a clear line drawn in quiet still. The next day, his phone rang. It was his son. No jokes, no sarcasm, just respect. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're standards. And when you raise the standard, people either rise to meet it or fall away. Either way, you stop shrinking. And if they push back, let them. Boundaries aren't meant to make others comfortable. They're meant to make you whole again. Respect isn't built through silence. It's built the moment you say, "This is where I end, and where your treatment of me must begin again." That's not harsh. That's healing. Now here's the fifth shift. It's about giving, not from guilt, but from grace. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you gave your time, your help, your heart, and actually felt seen? Not just thanked politely, but genuinely valued? Because here's what no one tells you. The more you give without appreciation, the less your gift is even noticed. Not because it's not good, but because it becomes expected. And what's expected is rarely respected. I met a man named Harold. He was the rock of his family, helped his kids buy their first homes, fixed broken pipes, watched the grandkids with joy, loaned money again and again. He never asked for anything back. But when Harold needed a ride to a doctor's appointment, they were too busy. He didn't yell. He didn't guilt them. He just stopped offering help before it was needed, stopped rearranging his schedule to save theirs. He paused, he breathed, and he asked himself, why am I giving to people who act like I owe them? At first, his kids were annoyed, even angry, but then they noticed. They realized how much they'd leaned on him and how little they'd acknowledged it. And slowly, they came back, with respect in their tone and gratitude in their eyes. You see, generosity is a gift, but when it's unappreciated, it becomes invisible. So protect your kindness, make it sacred again, because you're not here to be drained, you're here to be honored. They started offering help without being asked, stayed longer at visits, called just to check in. They even asked about his needs, for once, not because he demanded it, but because he withdrew the endless supply. Love doesn't grow in a place where it's taken for granted. It grows where it's recognized, reciprocated, and respected. So from this moment on, don't give more than your peace can afford. Let your kindness have limits. Let your time be earned, because you deserve to give from a full heart, not an empty cup. And when you do give, let it be from overflow, not obligation. Let it be because your heart wants to, not because guilt told you to. You're not being selfish. You're being a sovereign. And the day you start honoring your own energy is the day they start honoring you back. Because quiet strength leaves the loudest mark. And now, the final shift. the one that changes everything. Build a life that radiates, with or without them. Because respect doesn't bloom in shadows. It blossoms in light. And if your entire world still revolves around your children, they'll never see you as the center of anything, just a moon circling their sun. But what if you became your own universe? I met a woman named Irene, widowed, at 74. Her house was quiet, too quiet. She kept her schedule open, just in case they might visit. Texted first, waited by the window, cooked meals. No one showed up to eat. One day, she looked around and realized she had made her entire life about being available to people who weren't. So she changed, not to prove anything, but to save herself. She joined a hiking group, took a watercolor class, learned French online, started wearing red lipstick again, just for fun. She smiled more, talked to strangers, filled her home with music and flowers, just for her. And slowly, her children noticed. They called, not out of guilt, but out of curiosity. They wanted to know who she was becoming, because people are drawn to light. And when you live with joy, with purpose, they don't feel obligated to come back. They want to. So stop waiting to be someone else's priority. Be your own, because the most powerful version of you is the one who stopped needing permission to shine. Pause just for a moment, not to rewind the past, but to reflect on the present. When was the last time you made a decision that was just for you, not for peace, not for them, just for you? We spend so much of our lives adjusting, shrinking, softening, sacrificing, and before we know it, we've forgotten what it feels like to stand tall in our own story. So go to the mirror. Really look, not to fix your hair, not to check for wrinkles, but to see the person behind the giving, behind the patience, behind the pain, and ask, one version of me, have I been hiding to keep others comfortable? When did I start apologizing for existing fully? Because the moment you stop chasing approval is the moment they feel your presence differently. Not as someone waiting to be heard, but as someone who already knows their own worth. This is the turning point. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. And it starts with one quiet decision to come back home to yourself. So if something stirred in you while listening, don't ignore it. That ache, that tightness in your chest, it's not weakness. It's the sound of your spirit knocking, asking for space, asking for truth, asking to be you again. We spend most of our lives learning how to give, how to provide, how to show love by showing up. But no one teaches us how to stop chasing, how to stop explaining, how to stand still and be enough. You see, your greatest legacy won't be the house you leave behind, not the savings, not the photo albums, not even the stories they half remember. It will be the energy you carried when you stopped proving and started being. Will they remember you as the one who kept saying yes, even when your soul was whispering no, the one who shrank yourself just to avoid another argument? Or will they remember that when something in you changed, that you started walking taller, speaking slower, living louder, that you found peace in solitude and joy in becoming whole again? Because respect doesn't return when you demand it. It returns when you quietly remind the world, I never lost it. I just stopped needing your permission. You're not fading. You're not done. You're not just someone's parent. You're a soul, still unfolding, still capable of surprising everyone, including yourself. So let your final chapter be your boldest. Let them witness your light and carry it long after you're gone. And maybe, just maybe, your transformation becomes their inspiration. Not because you told them how to live, but because you showed them what it looks like to be free. That is a legacy worth remembering, because the real gift you leave behind isn't in the will. It's in the way you carried your silence, your boundaries, your boldness. It's in the moment they look back and say, she didn't just grow old, she grew wise, and because of her, I walk taller too. If this message touched something deep inside you, then let it fade. Leave a comment below, share what resonated most, or how you plan to reclaim your voice. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on the bell. Here at Wisdom After 60, we don't just talk about aging, we talk about rising, because your story isn't over. It's just getting wiser, and we'd be honored to walk this chapter with you